Hello everyone, so this is going to be the last video of this blog about this second crash course to Python that we are doing in week 2. So now the last thing is, this video is going to be shorter than the other ones, and the last thing that we are going to discuss about are for loops. So you remember from last week we introduced while loops. A while loop is a kind of a structure that is going to iterate through some code as long as the condition is true. So for example, you can have something like while x is bigger than 100, and then you have some code like print hello world. So then, this print condition, this print statement is going to be executed as long as x is bigger than 100. For loops are actually very similar, but they are used to iterate over some code where generally we know the number of times that the code is going to be executed. So in a while loop, we don't know exactly how many times it's going to be executed. It's going to depend on the condition and how we change the variable in the condition. In a for loop, usually beforehand, we know the number of repetitions. And generally in Python, the for loop is used to iterate over a list, as you are going to see. So imagine that you have a list, exactly as before, which is named cities. And this list is going to have like 4 values inside. It's going to have like 4 strings: Glasgow, Perth, Dundee, and Edinburgh. So the structure of the while loop of the for loop, sorry, is going to be that I'm going to have like for, a keyword, goes in green, and then city, this is a variable. It's going to be the name of the variable, which is going to be inside the loop. And then in, you can see it goes in purple, another keyword, cities. So basically we say like for city in cities, and city is going to iterate and be each of these 4 elements. So we do for city in cities colon, and then we get our block of code with 1 indentation. And in this case, the code is very simple. It just says like print city. And then if we execute this code, you can see that, it says for city in cities. So then in the first iteration, city is going to be equal to Glasgow. So it's going to print it. In the second iteration, city is going to be equal to Perth, so it's going to print that. In the third one, it's going to be equal to Dundee, and it's going to print that. And then in the last one, it's going to be equal to Edinburgh. And then after this, it's going to automatically finish. No? So it's going to go through the list, it's going to consume all the elements, and then it's going to finish. So this is the last slide of this bit. So the thing is that before you saw that we can do for element in list print element, or do something with the element. But very often we also want to deal with for loops that are iterating a specified number of times, like, so do this 5 times, for example, no, like for x in 1 2 3 4 5 print x, for example. Python is actually making this very easy to us, because it has a function which is called range, and range actually is going to, range is going to get as a parameter a number. It can be 1 2 5 whatever, and it's going to return a list which is going to be all the elements between 0 and that number. So for example, if I say range 5, as you can see here, it's going to return a list which is going to contain 5 elements, and it's going to be 0 1 2 3 4. Mind that the last element stops 1 before. So for example, if I say range 5, the last element is 4, not 5, because it starts with 0 and the number of elements is 5, meaning that the last element is 4. So for example, in the code, if I say for x in range 5, remember range 5 is going to be transformed into a list from 0 to 5, print x, and you can see that it prints the numbers as expected. Hopefully you can see that using this functionality, we can also iterate through lists as before, lists that are not lists of numbers. So for example, I have a list called cities, which has, this is exactly the same list as before. It has Glasgow, Perth, Dundee, and Edinburgh. It has 4 elements. And then if I say for e in range 4, print cities, square brackets I, between the square brackets I. So here what is happening now is that range is going to be transformed with a list with 4 numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3. So then in the first iteration, I is going to be equal to 0, which is the first element of the range for list. And then I'm going to go to the next line, and then I'm going to say cities between the square brackets 0. So I'm getting the first element of the list, which is going to be Glasgow, and it's going to print that. And then, for example, in the last iteration, I is going to be 3 because that's the last element of the range list, 0, 1, 2, 3. So I is going to be 3. So then we come to the print cities between the square bracket 3, which is Edinburgh. So actually, as you can see, this works, but it's actually dangerous because I need to know beforehand the number of elements in the list, which in this case it was 4. But if you think before, I can have a list of any number of elements and it's going to be fine. It doesn't matter, I don't need to specify this. But if I use this method, I need to specify a number 4. So I need to know beforehand that the list has 4 elements. And I hope you see that this makes the code very unstable, because if later on someone adds like a 5th city, like, I don't know, Manchester, for example, and then I go through this code, Manchester is never going to be printed because I is never going to be, it's never going to address the last element. So those of you who know about Python, you probably know that there are ways of avoiding this, of automatically getting the length of the list and using this, but we are not going to do this today. I think what's quite important is that if you need to iterate through a list, it's much better to use this way. But then if you need to iterate through numbers, as we will see on our code later on when we write better controllers, it's actually better to use the range function.